everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name's Scott Coyne, and I'll be your host for this episode. And joining me to be my wingman to review the week in Belgian football, which is Matchday 30 in the Pro League, the end of the regular season. The regular season is complete, is the one and only Mr. Joris Beck. How has your week been, Joris?
Obviously, it's been quite well, but not only because of your Genk result. I actually had a pretty good week this week. How about you?
Yep, I had a good week as well. A busy week, but a good one. That's how I like them. Much like the action. Speaking of which, what did happen on the final weekend of the regular season? Well, in the big game of the weekend, Genk beat Union Saint-Gilloise 2-1. Standard and Antwerp finished goalless. Anderlecht beat Cercle Brugge 3-0. Beerschot lost 2-1 to Westerlo. Club Brugge beat Charleroi 4-2. Ghent lost 2-1 at home to Kortrijk. Mechelen won 2-1 against Dender, and Leuven had a fairly dramatic 3-2 win against St Truden. So starting at the top and working down, the big game at the weekend really for many was involving your side, Joris. Genk managing to win 2-1 against Union Saint-Gilloise, which I'm sure you'll be very pleased with for a number of reasons. A result that probably underlines Genk's title credentials in a few ways. A really strong performance, an important point, I thought. Goals obviously coming from Arokadari and O. Interestingly, Genk remain undefeated at home this season, a pleasing statistic and another target maybe for them to set. Not only ideally try and go and win the title, but see if you can go the entire season undefeated at home. That would be a nice stat to have regardless of what happens. Your side in mentally quite a good place at the moment.
Yes, definitely, and it would go a long way for getting that potential title, of course, as well. If they would indeed go unbeaten, even throughout the playoffs, that would be a big step already. Provided there are some wins in there, of course. But 13 wins out of 15 home games, 2 draws, 2 0-0 draws as well. So it could have been, with a bit more efficiency, it could have been different. But definitely, really, really, really good, and happy to have won this game. Not only to win the game, but also just the performance in general. Even when it was 0-0, of course, you need to win those games, so that's good to pull it over the line as well. But the performance actually was going quite well. Just the efficiency actually was relatively lacking still a little bit. Um, I was hoping this would be a game like this, but I was not really expecting it. But I'm happy that Genk continued their good form, their good points haul, and in this case, finally had a good performance as well. It looks like they're performing quite well against top sides as well, which is another encouraging sign. With 20 points out of the 30 possible points taken against the eventual Champions playoff opponents, which is the best score of all. But we also know from previous seasons that this doesn't necessarily mean anything inside those playoffs. But it can hopefully be a good omen and a good confidence boost. It was for sure. One downside, maybe Bangura's injury. He was playing only 20 minutes or so in the end, and performing really well, to be honest. That was a bit of a scary moment for me, or else, we're like a little afraid. Zattelberger hadn't been performing that high level anymore, at that high level anymore, as he was in the beginning of the season for a couple of months now, after coming back from an injury himself as well. But in this game, he actually did really well, and he topped it off with a nice assist as well on the first goal as well. A nice run, good first touch, and an easy, not easy, but like a good pass side to Tolu, who only had to smash it in at that point. So yeah, really, really, really encouraging performance. good news flying around apart from that as well. With I already mentioned some of the call-ups last week. I fear Brahura was one of them. He will unfortunately miss his international debut, or it will have to wait a little bit longer at least because of this injury. But yeah, that's still hopefully for him to come, and hopefully we don't have an update yet. I think it should come more or less today or tomorrow. But that it's not too bad, and that he can recover by the first game of the playoffs. But yeah, I'll try to sneak to talk a bit much here about Genk and a bit less taking everything else to Genk like last week, like I did last week. Yeah, but yeah, this is still the time to do it. But yeah, really good performance. Was hoping that I would finally win again with more than one goal difference. It has been a while. It wasn't to be in the end, but mature performance, a good revenge as well. Another good omen or good sign or good mental point that they've taken after the big defeat in Union, of course, as well. Probably Genk's worst game of the season, or at least the game where their weaknesses were exposed the most. But now they more or less, of course, it's less clear in the scoreline, but more or less the same to Union as well. With the caveat, we'll go to Union as well, of course. They were missing a few players, Van Houten and Machida, most notably. Yeah, a few key players or regular starters, and not being in the squad now, of course, due to injury. Once they recover that, then it will change their dynamic a bit as well. But yeah, a little blow for them nonetheless. Um, yeah, and for Union, it was also probably the worst game of 2024-5 we are at the moment already. So yeah, because of Genk being strong, but also they indeed were not performing well. Genk learned their lesson, I guess, from that first game. Will be interesting fights in the playoffs now as well. Still, but yeah, good few performances from Genk's side. Also, Sor making his coming back into the squad right before the fire to make a few minutes right at the end in the regular season, which this was the first game until Bahura got off. Where in a while where Genk were fully complete without any injuries in the squad. Yeah, which is a rare feat, not only for Genk but just in general in the league. So another encouraging sign, and also if you can see the substitutes even making a difference as well, even in this game, or deepening the gap at that point with an Adedeji Sternberg assist for the second goal. Okay, enough about Genk. Indeed, Union, yeah, worst game of their season in a while, or at least in a long while. It's 2025, and yeah, the main that in itself was a bit of a surprise. That they weren't performing well in comparison to previous weeks and the form of both sides. But another surprising thing is that they got off without any yellow card, which yeah, I mean, it's not a big thing, but like there were a lot of obstruction fouls, mainly in the first half, and pushes in the back, like were and also of several same players as well. McAllister, I'm looking at you. It wouldn't have mattered in the end for like a further outcome of anything, I guess, because he was not one of the players in on a suspension alert, but yeah, a few others were. But okay, side note, footnote as well in the way. But yeah, they only forced Penders to have one save outside of the goal, of course, as well. That was also McAllister, but yeah, which shows that they were not really on their level that we're used to for them. And yeah, this it's too early to really cancel them out for the title, I think, but it's a big blow anyway. Like to be a few points back on both Genk and Club Brugge now, right at the end of the regular season, right going into those playoffs, also with a loss. It doesn't have to mean anything yet, but yeah, makes their job a lot more difficult for sure.
Yeah, Pocognoli had quite a lot to say that I thought was very fair after the game, saying that, that you could see the progress that they still have to make to kind of compete at that real business end of the season. And he did say, he says, we've got to make sure we're present in those 10 playoff games. I think his feeling was they weren't completely present for a number of reasons. There's a couple of missing members of personnel that you were touching on, but generally they were not at the level that they'd been at recently. So I suppose in a way it's very much what Pocognoli said. It's coming to recognise what Fink was alluding to last week when he said it's all about the mental approach now. There's an element to that, I think, to this as well, and I think he just felt that they missed the level that he would want them to be at, and it's another reminder that they need to be there for the start of those playoffs, as you say, not to make sure that they're not completely out of the conversation there as well. Brian Ainan, conversely, just to circle back to him for a minute, obviously had a very good week or so for a number of reasons. He was saying afterwards, if we can continue like this, then absolutely we've got a great chance to win this title. So I think the confidence that's been in that squad for a while, in that Genk squad, is now vocally making itself known as well, which is interesting psychologically, I think, because quite often, even at this stage of the season, some people will have that temptation to say, I'm not going to talk about that at the moment, but there have been some noises coming out of some figures in Genk that are being quite affirmative about that and saying, absolutely, we're in this, we're in a good place. There's no reason we can't do this, and I think that's a positive thing. I like that when that comes out of clubs, and that's a change as well to coincide with the imminent beginning of the playoffs. Speaking of sides that didn't hit or haven't been hitting their normal level, arguably for a while, Antwerp went to Schlesien this weekend to play Standard, and a game, a poor game on the whole that finished goalless. Very little to say about it, really. Antwerp remained very sluggish, completely changed the system in the second half, tried to shake it up, didn't really make any impact on the game at all, and Ulderink, who finally makes it into the dugout, which a lot of people will be glad about, I suppose, bemoaning their sort of lack of creativity and their lack of depth as well.
Yeah, definitely. Both sides not in their best shape. Although Standard probably had one of their better games of the season. They were quite dominant, but same issues as always. Not enough goals, not enough efficiency for them. Good game for Lammers, I guess, as well. Another one who got a call up for the squad, for the national squad. And a former, maybe the main news out of this is probably a former Red Devil, catching an injury, Alderweireld, at the end of the game, catching an injury, and it looks quite bad. And it's quite doubtful he will have a meaningful impact still in the playoffs. I believe their latest status is like he hopes to at least make an appearance still, but that sounds more like maybe in the final, either home game or completely final game in the final minutes, getting a substitution and then just getting on the pitch without necessarily being actually fit to play. But yeah, we'll have to see about that. But their performance levels in general, though, are very worrying to me as well. Like they're just difficult to watch themselves as well at the moment, much like Standard has been for the many parts of the season. But in this game, Antwerp was the side that was, they're really dropping in. Both sides, I guess, actually don't really have much of a bench. Had much of a bench in this game anymore either. The interesting things to come for Antwerp as well. Well, other things that there's quite a few transfer rumors, but also they might have to do a whole overhaul, looking a bit more ahead already. We'll touch on that in the upcoming months for sure as well, once things are a bit more clear. But few incoming transfer rumors already, but also, yeah, I mean, there's a high likelihood that they will have to change a whole squad while that's already a squad that's stretched quite thin at the moment. So they will have an interesting summer ahead as well. But yeah, a lot of that and how that will be filled in probably hinges on what they will do in the playoffs, and for that they will have to get their performance levels higher again.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. There's a lot of things up in the air at Antwerp. It feels like there's more and more things going up in the air each week with them, and it's actually quite difficult to figure out really what's kind of going on inside, because it just seems to be getting a bit weirder week by week. Last week, I specifically said I had a feeling that the squad had almost chucked it in a way for the season. It kind of still feels like that a little bit. I suppose there was always an issue with Alderweireld as well, because I think there'd been an acknowledgement that he may be calling time in his career anyway at the end of the season. That was something that I'd been kind of signposted a while ago, and I think this abductor tear, this 3 to 6 weeks, I think just throws that into stark contrast a wee bit. It'll be interesting to see whether that is a factor in at the end of the season, where he does decide to kind of call it a day or not, because that looked like it was going that way.
Well, he called it himself already,
yeah,
explicitly though.
Yeah. I think the thing for most people, whether you're of an Antwerp persuasion or not, is I think most people would like to see him finish his career on the pitch rather than to kind of finish it this way, I suppose. So we wish him well, and hopefully he'll get a few minutes before the end of the season. So if that is the case, he's able to finish that career, magnificent career, of course, on the pitch. Moving on to a game that did have a lot of action, and I suppose plenty to say about it, both on and off the pitch, was in Leuven at the Den Drief. Leuven managing to win against St Truiden 3-2. They have secured their Pro League status again for another season on the last day of the regular season for the second year running. Big performance from them, and a big performance in particular from their captain, Sieb Schrijvers, 2 goals and an assist. Could have had more as well, so good was his performance this weekend. He clearly decided that he was having a piece of this game, there's no doubt about it. The key moment in the game, I mean, you could argue about what it was. I kind of feel it was the penalty. Some would say it was the red card, but in truth, St Truiden managed to get back into the game even after the red card. And then the penalty comes, the irony being, of course, it's given away by a former Leuven player, of course, who's now at St Truiden, Louis Patrice, giving away the penalty, which proved to be decisive. And ultimately, Leuven's home form, Joris, is the thing that's probably saved them this season. I think, 28 out of 45 points at home so far. And it's that more than anything else that's seen them through.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, also wanted to touch on Schrijvers doubling his goal tally as well for the season. He didn't really have the best of seasons, but this game at least he was performing quite well. It's definitely carried his side in this case even. Yeah, and apart from that, not that much to say about Leuven. Yes, they secured their safety this time. It was a bit less nerve-wracking than last season, where they had to wait until the final minutes, but the chances were a bit less likely. They had put themselves a little bit more in a slightly better position than last season for that. And yeah, I mean, we will touch on the all separate playoffs later on, I'm sure, but now they might still go for European football as well. So that's how narrow the gaps are in that starting in that playoff. The Europe playoffs, of course, they would still need to win against a Champions playoff side as well. At the end of that, and running ahead a lot here, but a good win, and indeed home form doing quite well. There's a lot more to say about Sint-Truiden, I guess, in this case. they are missing out on safety for now, at least. And yeah, things are seeming to be a bit rotten in the state of Sint-Truiden as well. There, Mazu put an eggshell on his head. That's what I had noted down before I watched more yet. But yeah, then I saw like it was just comedy goals. Bertaccini interview throwing away like without naming names, but still throwing players under the bus, teammates under the bus that didn't fight enough. Another part, which was maybe good part of that interview, because that part, it's not the first time this season, and it's usually not a smart thing to do. But the other part of the interview, of course, what made more sense, and was like, we shouldn't be looking at the referees, and we should just look at ourselves. We deserve where we are, and that is unfortunately in this relegation playoffs. So brutal honesty. Also, of course, that goes then together, I guess, with the critique on his teammates as well. Maybe not going for it enough, or not and acknowledging the situation they were in enough. And if you score 16 goals, I guess it's still wrong to do so, but it's still, I mean, it's more understandable, and people, and even inside that playing squad, I guess players will forgive him for that. I guess he has given them some hope, but that was so the comedy gold was first that, and then right after that in the highlights, of course, so Bertaccini highlighting we shouldn't be looking at the refs. Yeah, and what did his manager do? Yeah, more than just look at the refs, but completely blame the refs, and just going full conspiracy theories. He was not, unfortunately, the only player or manager in the bottom of this classification who did that. Not only this weekend, but also even this weekend, not the only one. But that's It seems to be also potentially, so far we don't have any updates on that, but we know there is some discussions going on about Mazu's position as well. We don't know the outcome of that yet, so that might be a good sign for him by now. But there's definitely some there's hectic times at Sint-Truiden, and a worrying sign maybe going inside those playoffs. It doesn't have to be, because they might not get into that situation, but so far they haven't come behind to win a game yet this season. And that's so better don't go behind in their first few games of the playoffs, or get rid of that statistic and win a game after going behind so far, because this was actually maybe a good attempt, because they came back twice to equal terms, but to lose eventually still. Leuven, I mean, I was way too positive what I said there in the beginning. Obviously, they didn't have a good season at all, and so on. But given the situation of other sides, they are maybe having a second chance of restoring their season. And at this point, I will be happy that they avoided the relegation for now. Also, taking into account, although that's something I will talk about with another side as well, that next season it is virtually impossible to relegate. So that's even 2 seasons extra potentially. Of course, it's not completely for sure like this, that it's going to be like this, of course. But definitely a good step.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the removal of some of that tension in the bottom in some regards makes Leuven play next season. Obviously, we're going to have that transitionary season before the biggest change. Going back to a classic format, but it'll just be interesting to see how the removal of some of that relegation threat even next season will affect sides for Leuven, whether they're able to relax and be a little bit bolder in different ways about it. Chris Coleman afterwards talking about how happy he was because they went out and they were brave, got the job done, particularly after being really, really poor the week before, obviously at Kortrijk, where they absolutely just did not show up at all. And Mazu's rant I'm glad you gave me your lowdown on your take on that, because I was going to ask you what you made of that. Certainly one of the moments of the weekend, and I think it's highly likely that Felice is going to find himself in hot bother after that. There was a lot of things said by him there that, not only crazy, but don't tend to pass without further punishment. And I don't know whether it was just pressure or what prompted that, but it was absolutely bizarre. And one of those things that, depending on your role inside a club, you watch and you think, what on earth is he doing? Somebody just grab him off camera now, drag him off camera, whatever you do, whatever you need to do, lasso him, just get it done, because it was just the whole thing was a bit of a car crash, to be honest. Speaking of accidents, unintentional or otherwise, in the lead up to Club Brugge's 4-2 win over Charleroi, we were doubtful as to whether that game would even go ahead because of a rather big fire. A major fire, in fact, a nearby bike wholesalers near the Jan Bridle in Bruges, including the release of asbestos-related materials. But the game did eventually go ahead, club winning 4-2. Smooth sailing, I think, for them. A pretty dominant performance, I think it'd be fair to say. Jutgla was pretty excellent. Could have had a lot more than he did in this game. The only negative in many respects, obviously, was that absolutely wild moment with Simon Mignolet. One of those, you get challenges in games occasionally, Joris, where when you see them in real time, it feels like everybody just wants to sprint onto the pitch if you're not on it, because, just all of your instincts go, that's really bad, get on there as quickly as possible. And it looked like one of those. Thankfully, Mignolet stay overnight in hospital, just a bad concussion. Admittedly, it was a very good challenge, actually. He came flying out and he got the ball first and he got the job done, but obviously the contact looked absolutely brutal, didn't it?
Yeah, that really did not look good for him, for sure. Luckily, indeed, it seems that he'll be fine. Maybe he's already fine, or he will be fine, and he has a little time to recover before the playoffs start as well. Of course, yeah, I suppose that should be enough. Also, if not, at least on sportive merit grounds, it's not so bad because Jakkers, even in this game, did some good stuff, and we know he can replace him if he needs two more games, of course, as well. But yeah, dominant performance from Club Brugge. Early goal. Yeah, Charleroi came back to it, but by that time, Club Brugge arguably should have been ahead a bit more than just 1-0 at that already. But yeah, Charleroi equalized, and Guillagon, who scored that goal, also had a big header chance to make it even a 1-2 for Charleroi, and then things might have been different, of course. But yeah, he's just not really someone you want to hit the ball in. I guess there are other players that you would rather have in that position. But yeah, a good run from him. And yeah, talking about Jakkers, that was his first appearance for Club Brugge in the league since April last year. So yeah, almost a year outside of it. Of course, he did feature in the cup games of Club Brugge this season already as well. So it's not that he was completely without playing rhythm. Plus, that is a bit less important for a goalkeeper, as we know. But as I said, he did a good job. Especially actually on what eventually would become the second goal. He still had a really good first save. But yeah, Charleroi, yeah, I mean, it was not their best game of the season, but still you could see some flashes of why they are a more watchable side than they have been in recent years as well. So yeah, they did deserve their goals as well, I guess. But at the back, it wasn't always looking pretty. But they were playing or performing quite well, playing quite good football at times. And that at one of the most difficult grounds, of course, to play at. So sure as well. So yeah, they're also still really in that fight. They're one of the 5 teams, I guess, within 1 point of in those Euro playoffs, then they really want to give it a go to grab that chance to win that playoff at least, and then have that chance to get a European ticket still as well, out of what has been a good season, where arguably they probably would have deserved to even be in that top six, and the Champions playoffs as well. But for that, I suppose mainly Stulic should have started scoring a little bit earlier in the season, and things could have looked differently. But yeah, the first goal achieved, I guess they never really were pulled completely into the relegation mess. With more, they were really a mid-table side this season in the end, by the end of the season. And now they have some perspective, I guess, to move forward and try to grab that win as well. And why not? To be honest, I give them quite a good chance if they can keep the performances up.
Yep. Speaking of keeping performances up, Anderlecht, who recently have been talking a lot about lack of consistency and the need to try and find consistency, reacting well to a very poor performance last weekend against Westerlo, winning 3-0 at home against Cercle Brugge. Which had the end result of Cercle failing to guarantee their safety and dropping into the playdowns, which is where they'll now finish the season, 6 games ahead to try and save their season now. There was further repercussions from that result as well, because only a matter of hours later, Cercle's T1 Ferdinand Feldhofer was dismissed. Game was a surprise to some. Perhaps shouldn't be so surprising if you keep a close eye on Belgian football, really. We know how reactive or proactive, if you like, clubs can be in certain situations, and he has ultimately paid the price for the failure of the club to secure outright their status for another season, and they're going to have to look to do it the hard way. Cercle actually played reasonably well this weekend. I thought they pushed Anderlecht pretty hard, which they were going to have to do. I felt it was always going to be an open game. Anderlecht scoring first obviously didn't help, because it meant they really had to go for it, which left more space and left them more exposed. Perhaps not controversially, but frustratingly for them, they did equalise when it was only 1-0, and the goal was chopped off for a foul in the build-up, which I think ultimately was the right call, actually. It's funny when things are kind of not going your way, things like this just kind of get magnified, and they had quite a lot to say about that after the game. It goes to 2-0. They need to keep pushing, and obviously they lost the third goal as well. But ultimately, they played quite well, created a few chances, and their issue ultimately, I suppose, is they're not scoring enough goals. It's worth underlining they haven't been playing badly, even when they've not been picking up points, but not making anything of their chances. And when you go and look at their numbers, and when you take Kevin Denke, of course, out of the numbers and his contribution, it's looking pretty worrying for them.
Or very worrying even, because I will add to that as well. And then that their top goal scorer at the moment I guess it's a joint one, but are a few players who have scored 3 goals, and yeah, that's not many. Apart from Denke, of course, who scored 10, but taking him out of that equation because he isn't there anymore. Yeah, that when there is a worrying sign for Citra that they can't turn around games, for Cercle is they just can't score. They can't. Yeah, they haven't won a game in 2 months now as well, despite not losing too many either. Even still, but yeah, that's also probably ultimately what killed Feldhofer. And then now they probably made a few wrong calls in the, especially in the winter transfer window. I guess maybe they also gotten a bit unlucky, but they're playing quite well, but nobody's scoring the goals indeed. Because like you were saying in the beginning, like Anderlecht reacted quite well. At least not in the performance. That you can't really say that. I guess the result, of course, yes, ultimately 3-0. But you could also feel it in the stadium. Like the people were for a long time chanting against the board again. Yeah, now after 3-0, that changed and was more like, oh yeah, hooray, hooray, we won, and then everything's good again. But like, yeah, there's a schism, there's still that schism in the fan base as well. And then yeah, okay, ultimately they did enough to win this game, but that might have been more the lack of a striker for Cercle there, and of course Kosemans having a few good saves as well. Though I shouldn't dismiss that. He reacted well after his howler last week, for sure. Uh, Other things that are noteworthy, Vertonghen back, of course. So like, yeah, the Spurs duo had a bit of a mixed bag weekend. Former Spurs central center back duo with Alderweireld injury and Vertonghen finally being back from injury. And playing the 90 minutes even when he indicated even after the game that he's not completely ready for that, maybe probably, which is a funny thing, I guess, as well a bit. But yeah, and yeah, I mean that are the main things I guess in this game. Like Andre, yeah, performance was not really great. Result, of course, was good. Cercle performance was okay, but result really bad, and causing them to not get out of the relegation playoffs, and yeah, leaving all of us at least were worried for them in those playoffs because they can't score any goals. And I mean, defensively, they're also not the best side either at the same point. So that's a thin line they're walking on. In yeah, will they manage to escape the drop zone by drop zone or the other playoff zone against the Challenger Pro League size? Yeah, we are having doubts about that, I guess.
Yeah, I think the heat's definitely rising on them. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. For a number of reasons. For a long time, we spoke months ago. I think it was probably when we knew for certain that Kevin Denke was going. We highlighted that was a big thing, going to be a big thing to watch out for in determining the course of the rest of their season, didn't we? Because we were saying that, without his goals, even at that point, and that's going back much earlier in the season, those concerns were kind of obvious. And then since he's left, not only has kind of nobody really stepped up to replace him, collectively as a squad, the goals haven't been replaced either. That's the only other way you can do it if you don't get, that golden individual. Neither has happened for them. And I did have a worry while I was watching to see who might come in as replacement. What they ultimately decided to do was stick to the operating model, bring in a young player who has potential, who will develop and get better. But nobody has really stepped up. And I felt that because of the way their season was going, that there was quite a strong argument and a little bit of money being spent on bringing in a reasonably recognised striker, at least for a year or 18 months on some kind of transitionary basis, because I felt it was always a big risk to hope that one of those young players was going to be able to, become the next Kevin Denke on any level. So it was a risky strategy, which at the moment doesn't look like it's paid off. So I suppose serving Feldhofer's head on a platter really is well, it's looking for the shock tactic, isn't it? It's looking for the classic T1 coaching bounce. If the rumour mill and the journalistic mill and the chatter mill is to be believed, it looks like a certain Besnik Haze, who up until very recently, of course, was at Mechelen, is the strong front runner to take over. There's no confirmation of that yet as of recording, but all indications are that that's going to be confirmed quite soon. So by the time you listen to this may well be official. So we'll come back to it. If that is the case, Joris, bearing in mind Cercle lost some really big players over the summer and at various points through the season, Alegbe, Dalland, Denke, Lopez, even CK, these issues go right back to the beginning of the season as well. If the Hazy stories are to be confirmed in the coming hours, what do you make of that appointment?
we're gonna have a lot of fun because we know how good Hazi deals with strikers that can't score, and especially not even on training. So yeah, I mean that would be a ridiculous appointment in my view. Okay, I guess there is a thing to say, like he seems to tend to be able to get a team on the rails in the beginning of a tenure, like more like a crisis manager. But I would at least not think it's a long term good appointment. Of course, could be a contract for the rest of the season, but I mean, if he would get them out of trouble in that time spell, there probably is a clause in that already as well that it would automatically be prolonged or anything. I would, or they will be like, it would be weird, I guess, as well to step away from him at that point, and that might not be the right call either. So I'm not sure is probably the safest or like the lightest thing I could say about his appointment. If it goes through, of course.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, that, because I think when you consider the possibility of it being Besnik Cassie, and you also look at the personalities of some of the other T1s down with those play down sides, you have Bernd Stork, who's tactically quite smart, a very wily operator, quite an underrated coach on the whole. You have Mazu at St Truden, who as of now is still there. Whether he is when we convene this time next week, we'll need to wait and see. Yeah, but Mazu's very well known for being very good with his man management and his group dynamics. And the thing about Hazy is there's a bit of grit and steel about his personality. And there may be a feeling that they want to go for him if this goes through because, you've got a 6-game cage fight on there and they need that bit of steel possibly to pull them through. That might be the thinking, because my initial reaction when I heard this news kind of breaking just today was that I'm not sure he's the right fit in terms of the template of the way that Cercle look to play and what they're trying to do. So it may very well be a smart short-term appointment, but beyond that, I would question whether it's necessarily the right thing for Cercle. So it'll be really interesting to see which way this works out, because time is obviously not on their side. So regardless of who it is, somebody needs to come in quickly to kind of galvanise the players, because my feeling about Feldhofer was that the squad were still very much behind him as well.
Yeah, and jumping on some statistics again as well against the sides they will have to face again. Our Ben, I have to give him the credits. Looked it up. They've only won once against Beerschot, and for the rest they haven't won against either Kortrijk or Sint-Truiden this season. So the other sides in this relegation playoffs. So despite starting in the best position out of those four sides, these signs are also not looking great. And that was partially, at least, when they still had Dinky, of course.
Yeah, let's see how they respond to the pressure, because as I was saying to somebody in conversation today, we can look at all the detail and all the stats. Ultimately, it comes down to how you handle that pressure and who can or will step up. And that's the biggest question, because you look at some of these clubs in the play down and you're just wondering, who is going to be able to do that, because there's pretty slim pickings when you look at it from the outside. Speaking of Besnik Hazy, his recently former side, Mechelen, managed to get a 2-1 win. Their final home game of the regular season against Dender. Dender, despite losing, end up securing their Pro League status for another season. They can breathe a sigh of relief over the next few weeks. Benito Raman getting another goal, his 13th of the season. He seems to have quite enjoyed his season at Mechelen. He was saying afterwards that he thinks he's possibly playing the best football of his career. Which may be true, actually. I was quite lukewarm on that signing when they made it, because I wasn't convinced he would be able to provide a kind of meaningful contribution to them. Irony of that is his contribution is probably is the single most important contribution to Mechelen's season, because as we highlighted last week and the week before, without those goals, Mechelen would almost certainly be in the playdowns, I think. So it has been significant in the end. Bill Antonio and Keanu Van Raffelen proving pretty decisive, not for the first time this season yet again. Players who you would imagine will have a big role to play next season. Certainly the club will hope so. Looks like Dan Foulon's off. Very possibly to Antwerp, although that's been coming for a long time. We've known that contract wouldn't be renewed. I suppose a happy end to the regular season. They got the 2 results they needed. Van der Beest afterwards saying, ultimately, we've got to where we want to be and where we should be. So from that perspective, it's job done. They can relax a little bit and probably look forward to these playoffs, Joris, because if Mechelen can play the way that they can, they have more goals in that side than a lot of the other sides in this playoff. So there's a strong argument to say that actually they're quite strong contenders to potentially go and win this playoff.
Yeah, again, in these playoffs, it's difficult to really say anything at the moment because like literally 5 teams inside 1 point or like 1.5 points, I guess we should say, but still within 1 game distance. So only then they're lacking a bit behind. That could have been different if they would have done something different in this game as well, of course. Even them, they are not completely out of it yet. At the start, at least, could be soon. They have less margin of errors. But I do believe, to talk about them first a little before I jump to Mechelen, they will be very, very happy that, they just about stay in the league. Not even on goal difference because they have a lesser goal difference than Cercle Brugge, but on games won as the one of the peculiarities of Belgian football, of course. I think we're one of the only leagues, or maybe the only league in this part of the world that has that rule. They have 1 game, one. Wow, one more have one one more win for Dender in comparison to Cercle Brugge. And yes, I won't edit this out. This was just
well done,
a difficult
well
moment. I got there in the end, but yes, just like Dender, I guess. But just escaped. Where then one noteworthy thing, maybe also like it was Leonard Hens scoring. A very he born and raised in Mechelen as well. He was in the youth academy, a former KV Mechelen goalkeeper as well before he turned to the field at the neighbors and the rivals, local rivals, Racing Mechelen. To eventually make his way up into the league as well, because Racing Mechelen is of course a few divisions below in the pyramid, but still good for them. Even though they should have probably scored a bit more, Mechelen deserved to win this game. I think but it went a bit more. There could have been more goals in this. It went a bit, both sides. The game went up and down from and one end to another end. But Bert had an incredible chance where we should have passed the ball instead of going for his success, which was blocked. Schadler had a few chances as well. Like he had been prolific at some point of the season, but he seems to have completely lost that. That maybe goes for all of their attackers as well. But in the end, it doesn't matter. They will be happy that they stay in the league, and especially for them, I think they will. If of course everything stays like it's planned to stay for the format for next season, with only one team going down going down with a chance of going down, even still then playing the playoffs against Challenger Pro League side, that's a big relief for them as well. One of the sides that will be very happy about that. Their second half of the season hasn't been great at all, but they did enough. So it's also good to note, I guess, as well. Sometimes it is indeed important to make a good start. Well, it's always a good thing to start the season well, so you can rely on those points and you can get what you already have. They can't take from you anymore. And that's what they did. Mechelen, don't have actually that much to mention about them, but indeed they are in that mix for winning that playoff. And indeed arguably have a good chance if they can get their efficiency going, which is still a little bit well, here and there, I guess sometimes it is there, sometimes not. And also still wondering with which body part Foulon scored, but that's that looked a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It could have been a painful part. It could have been a very male part. It could have been around that area. It was at least so, but it was not very clear on the images that I saw. And well, I don't have any desire to really go much deeper into that topic, but yeah. He made it look casual in his celebration, I guess, it was not with his foot. Let's say that.
Moving on to a game which saw Kortrijk manage to do something that they've not done since very close to this time last season, and that's win back-to-back games, which in itself is a massive sign of progress there. They went to Ghent and managed to win 2-1, which is pretty impressive, despite the game being pretty poor and lacklustre. Anyway, Kortrijk managed to win back-to-back. It's the first time they've done that in the league since they won the back-to-back playoff finals against Lommel last year, which is extraordinary. So, that's a huge leap forward in one respect. Ghent's unbeaten run, I think, of 9 now over. Daniel Milisevic's first domestic defeat as well. And interestingly, Thierry Ambrose now has, I think, 4-3. And his last goal before this little glut, which nobody knows where it's came from. Bernd Stork probably knows. It's probably something he's been putting in his water bottles at training or whatever the supplements he's been feeding him, legal or otherwise. His last goal before that was in December. But another shout out to our Ben, seeing as he's not with us again this week. Ben did say that Ambrose tends to only score goals at this time of the season, which is true as well, because the same thing happened, bringing it back full circle to that playoff final against Lommel last year. He was a decisive factor in the end. He decided to score a few goals over that tie. So he likes this time of the season. And Thierry Ambrose is one of the few players, Joris, when you think about it, who's actually been scoring some goals recently amongst the sides down in the playdown clubs. So if he can keep this up, it's an encouraging factor for them. The big question I wanted to ask you around Kortrijk is, do you think Stork will now see or feel a little chink of light looking at the way things have worked out this weekend?
I guess he should, even if he doesn't necessarily believe it in himself, but I think he does. But he definitely should. Also going on Ambrosen as well and linking it to Cercle Brugge as well, like he scored more goals in these 3 games than all of the remaining people at Cercle Brugge have done. Well, okay, not together, of course, but a singular player.
Yep.
Yeah, that's worrying, I guess. Again, as well, when the next game, of course, is going to be crucial, which is Kortrijk at home against Cercle Brugge. So if they could win that one, they put the heat on Cercle. They're 6 points behind Cercle, I believe, and 5 points behind Sint-Truiden. Still a lot, and when there's only 18 points to take, and maybe in addition, Beerschot will be out. The weird thing is that Beerschot might be certain of relegation after only one game in these playoffs if results go their way. I believe in that case, Kortrijk should not win though. So I mean that Kortrijk will need to win that first game as well. But Beerschot being out, so maybe realistically 12 to 15 points to be decided between the other sides. If they go on a good run, so it is more or less a knockout. They have to approach it like that, I guess, and win all the knockout games. And there is a chance. And who would have thought we would say that a few weeks ago? So that's already a win at the moment. Will it be enough? We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's unlikely they will completely get out of the worries to go past both sides, but maybe they can catch one off Sint-Truiden and Cercle, and then anything's possible in the challenger against the challenger Pro League side, of course, which is a very much unknown quantity at the moment as well. Of course, we have no idea who is that going to be. But yeah, definitely Kortrijk. Interesting situation there, and then yeah, signs of life indeed. On Ghent, yeah, indeed, first loss in 2025 is what I wanted to add as well. But you already mentioned the other stats going towards that as well, and like reminiscent of at least that Ghent Ostende game a few years ago, which was even more dramatic for them, of course, as well, because then at that point they dropped out of the Champions playoffs because of that result. This time they were already certain, luckily for them, but they have something with our final game of regular season, I guess. Encouraging thing might be that Fadiga is back after his heart injuries, heart issues. First appearance since November, and scoring immediately as well in that short cameo he had, and also getting into a fight as well in right after the goal, after that goal as well, still causing Kortrijk to get a red card as well. So a suspension that might not be good for their chances in the playoffs, of course, or at least specifically in that first game. But yeah, Fadiga back might be a bonus for Ghent. But all in all, such a Ghent result, I guess.
That's quite a good way of putting it. The reason I wanted to get your thoughts, particularly on Stork and the possible chink of light, was he did say afterwards, he said, he smiled wryly at one point in his press conference, and he said, everything is possible in football. And I thought, okay, I mean, that's quite interesting. He's signposting that. And Tom van den Berg, of course, former Kortrijk goalkeeper who's now at the Buffaloes, said just before Stork appeared at his press conference on behalf of Ghent, when talking about Kortrijk, he said the thing with Kortrijk is Kortrijk with Stork is a different Kortrijk. So I think, there's a couple of comments there that suggested that, there might be a few people who see that chink of light. And as you highlighted, that first game is Kortrijk at home to Cercle in the playdowns for both of those two. And if Kortrijk could win that, then, the margin becomes absolutely that, really, really marginal, and things change completely, which just kind of highlights the intensity of, who's going to be able to respond and kind of step up when the pressure is, bearing down on you on these games. Speaking of bearing down and pressure being lifted, the final game of the weekend, Westerlo went to Antwerp, went to Kiel to play Beerschot and managed to win 2-1, which meant that Westerlo finally secured their Pro League status for another season. And it was really Westerlo's overall efficiency. They took their opportunities, which meant they got the points. Beerschot, not really offering enough to get anything out of this game, which feels, a bit like Groundhog Day, saying that, for yet another week about them. The inevitable is now looming, as you were saying. They could officially be gone after the first round of games very shortly as well. Probably not too much to say about this game.
Yeah, indeed, not really. Really, not that much to say against about this game. I don't have anything even. I guess it's really, yeah. I mean, a result.
Yeah. Speaking of this game, I've got a little stat that kind of came to me randomly today when I was looking at some data on a number of things. One of these two sides has the most yellow cards this season. Do you know which side it is and how many cards, just to put you on the spot?
Oh, okay. So both yellow and red combined, right?
Well, we'll go with yellow. We'll go with yellow. Who's got the most yellows,
Okay,
and
I'm
how
gonna
many do you
guess.
think it is?
I'm gonna. It would be logical to say Beerschot, but I'm gonna guess it's Westerlo.
And do you know? You're right. Do you know how many they've got?
Okay, let's. Calculated guess. It's not gonna be very calculated. So 30 games. 90.
Yeah, you're not a million miles away. They've got 80. And they are comfortably the side with the most yellows. The second most after that is Leuven, with only 71, which is not that bad. So Westerlo pick up a lot of bookings, rightly or wrongly. And when we're on the subject of discipline, I mentioned Leuven there and their 71 yellow cards. Leuven have the joint most red cards. So Leuven have the second top yellows, but the joint reds. So Leuven definitely have a discipline issue, whether they would describe it as that or not, and that's something for them to look into ahead of next season. That was something I kind of noted down
Well,
today.
there's a prison in Leuven, so they can address it like that.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you could just send everybody to jail. That's one way of doing it. Yeah, yeah. You don't have to go very far. So there's a very strong argument for that, isn't there? Yeah. So we now know the full composition, obviously, of playoffs 2 and 3. The European playoff is Standard, Mechelen, Westerlo, Charleroi, Leuven, and Dender. And we know that that's going to be very tight because when we look at that at the moment, for the start of those playoffs, there is only 4 points separating all of those sides. So, it's going to be arguably a little bit more exciting than it has been in recent years. And certainly at the moment, it's kind of anybody's. Even though I did flag up Mechelen as one of the sides who potentially, when they're playing at their best, have more goals in them than some of those other sides. But we will see what happens. And playoff 3, the relegation playoff, Cercle Brugge, St Truden, Kortrijk, and Beerschot. There are only 6 points separating Cercle, St Truden, and Kortrijk. So again, that's about as tight as it can get. And as we've already said, one result one way on match day 1 of the relegation playoffs could completely change the perspective of that. We've all written Beerschot off. I think it's I think they're out of the discussion. You know what I mean, as far as playoff 3 is concerned. So we will see what happens. Obviously, there'll be a short break before all of that kicks off. Speaking of breaks, we're just about to have an international break, Joris. Rudy Garcia named his first squad just a few days ago, ahead of the two-headed game against the Ukraine. As of recording, obviously the first leg is on Thursday of this week. It will be in Spain in Murcia. The away leg for Belgium, and then on Sunday evening in Genk. The travelling roadshow begins for the Red Devils. The home fixture will be played in Genk. The second leg of the Ukraine game. What's your thoughts coming into this fixture and the kind of squad announcement generally?
Interesting one, I guess, is what you could say. Garcia made a few choices. I mean, and at the same time, he didn't make choices. I don't know. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Like it looks like he's looking a bit more to the Jupiler Pro League, sort of the own league, than the Disco did. Whether that's a good sign or a bad sign, I'm a bit in between there on that one. I think. As well, but also like the call-ups for example, Mechelen and Heine for the first call-up, then for Heine are signs of that. With that, and then I'm a bit surprised Smith is not included in the squad. That's one of the bigger surprises for me, even. But I suppose, as I've been alluding to last week, I think he is actually carrying a slight injury, so it might have been even discussed with him as well. So apart from that, Courtois being back is, of course, well, he's been in the news. It's your favorite topic, I know, Scott. That's probably the main news. Not really the main news, but one of the things. But also interesting to have. Maybe list all the debutants then as well. So Hayden already mentioned Raskin, another one of your favorite sites, and of course also Mokio, which is probably the most interesting and exciting one as well, getting his first call up. And now I am forgetting one that I also gonna make his first minutes, but if he plays, but I'm forgetting who it was. yeah, definitely a few debutants. So it's anyway good. And then will be interesting to see how it comes, how everything will pan out as well. Um, Also, especially in midfield, there are a few issues with injuries, so that's also the area where, for example, Heine and Rasquet and Mokyo actually got their call ups, so partially because of that as well. So I have to note that down. Um, yeah, few. Yeah, I mean, interesting selection. I'm not completely opposed to it. It's relatively logical. So no, like there was this very big pre-selection, pre-squad that had been listed. That's always a bit ridiculous, but apparently it's something you have to do for the UEFA. And that's when journalists dabble into it as well. But yeah, I mean, in that list, were some names like Benteke, Mertes, and some other more old timers, level experienced heads, to put it a bit more in a nicer way. But I'm glad those didn't get a call up, despite what they have meant for the side. It's not what the side needs moving forward. I think so. Yeah, that's that none of those are getting a call up, yeah, is a good sign to me. And a few debutants can always bring a fresh breath of air as well. And yeah, I mean, the squad is not bad. No real surprises. But yeah, it should be enough to also delve into the games as well. It should be enough to beat Ukraine, I guess. Normally, on paper, it should be enough at least.
Yeah, I think the Red Devils go into the tie pretty strong favourites. I think it's interesting that he's leaning quite heavily on experience generally. Obviously, there's a number of reasons for that, and very understandable. It's a very solid selection, I think, and relying on that to obviously win this tie to preserve that Nations League A status is important. That's my kind of main takeaway from the squad, that there's a little bit less youth in there on the whole, and it'll be interesting. I suppose the thing to watch out longer term is whether the makeup of this squad is the general feel that Garcia is going to bring to his time, or whether we will see after this tie, when the World Cup qualifiers start, the injection of a little bit more youth in different ways. But the important thing, I think, is probably to be pragmatic at this stage and just get this job done, because with international football, you have to start well as a coach, I think, regardless of when you're starting. It's important to do that. And I think he's picked quite wisely when it comes to giving himself the best possible chance to get everybody together and get that positive start.
Yeah, and of course, the fourth debutant, I looked it up now, is one I actually mentioned before already in Senna Lamas, of course, which it's unlikely that he will actually get his first minutes, to be honest, as well. But yeah, fair call up nonetheless, I suppose.
That's one of the things to watch out for, actually, over these two games, how many minutes maybe some of these debutants actually get. Because obviously the advantage to them being there is you get a closer look at them in training as well. Although they've had very little time together, of course, because of the games this weekend, so they really are right into it with very little chance to work in anything other than the initial game plan as well. Rudy Garcia said as much over the last few days, that he just had to get down to working with the system that he knows he wants to play for the game. Good luck to the Red Devils in those two ties. We will know the outcome by next time we convene. We should touch base as well, of course, with the Challenger Pro League, which has reached Matchday 26, hurtling towards the end of the season there. Only 4 games left for some sides, of course. Before the season, or a lot of the main business is known and concluded. What happened this weekend? Well, Club Next beat Young Genk 3-0. Ral beat Liège 2-1. Beveren lost 2-0 to Molenbeek. Frank Baran lost 3-1 to Zulte Waregem. Anderlecht Futures and Serang finished 1 each. Lokeren beat RFC Liège 2-1, and Lommel lost 1-0 to Patro Eisden. So, Joris, Molenbeek have leapfrog Zulte. They've now gone top on 53 points. Zalta have dropped to second. They're on 52 points. Ral had to really win this weekend in order to keep the pressure that's been there for a long time now up, because they've obviously got one game less. Because of the loss of Denza. They are sitting third, just outside the automatic promotion spots at the moment on 50 points. So all it takes is really one slip up and away from Zalta or Molenbeek before the end of the season for Ral to kind of capitalise. So it's still all up for grabs. Interestingly, I've got the fixtures here for the rest of the season for Zalta, Molenbeek, and Ral. Obviously, as I was saying, Ral have only got 3 games left. They've got Young Genk, Frank Moran, and Lommel. I don't see them dropping too many points there. Molenbeek have got Serang, Patro, Lommel, and the big one probably is the one on the final day of the season, where Zalta and Molenbeek are due to meet. That could well be the deciding game if they pick up maximum points, of course, in the lead up to that. Zalta have got Anderlecht, Futures, Sarang, and Lokeren to play before then. So you don't see either of those 3 sides dropping too many points between now and the final game, really, do you?
Maybe not, and that would be indeed worrying for one of those 2 sides that face each other in that that last day of the season. When you look at it, of course, if things do go wrong or like differently, of course, it could also be that one of those 2 sides are already certain, and then this game, might swing the other team's way more easily, which would be the bad sign for La Louvière in that case. But and they are trailing anyway so far. But they really need to keep it into the race until that point, I guess. They're still in it, and well, if it's not for this, then at least maybe in the promotion playoffs they will be one of the favorites, of course. But let's hope for them. I mean, that they can get a bit closer to these 2 sides on top, and then have making an exciting final day. But yeah, I still see them as third horse in this race, and maybe stay there as well. But nothing is impossible, and we don't know with Zultuarium indeed dropping a bit in form. Who knows what is possible?
Yeah, and as we were saying last week, Zalta are absolutely not the same side without Jelle Vossen. Despite getting back to winning ways this weekend, they are a different proposition without him. So we'll see if they can hold their nerve. Speaking of holding nerve, we've been talking a lot about the playdowns from the Pro League. The playoffs in the Challenger Pro League, which are coming up, are going to be really exciting and interesting, I think. Not a lot between the sides, as is usually the case. And obviously, if Ral end up taking part in that and don't achieve automatic promotion, it's going to be really interesting to see how they do, because they've been having an extraordinarily strong and consistent season. And I think if they aren't able to go up in some form, I think they'll probably be very disappointed with what has been a pretty remarkable season, really, by their standards, as we've been flagging up for a while. And equally, when you look at the sides who may feature from the Pro League's perspective in that play-down final against one of these Challenger Pro League sides, it's very difficult to call it either way, because whether it's, for example, Cercle or St Truden, they are arguably better than a lot of these Challenger Pro League sides. Having said that, it's what we were saying earlier on in this episode about who handles the pressure ultimately is more important, because there are so many sides in the mix who could find themselves in situations they don't want to, and it's about how they handle that pressure. We saw last season, Lommel, despite ending the season strongly, end up playing Kortrijk in the playoff final, and ultimately didn't handle the pressure as well as they would have liked, and failed to take what were quite a lot of opportunities over the tie, and Kortrijk did step up and hold their nerve ultimately. So it's an entirely different game when you get down to purely playing against the terror of relegation and possible promotion, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, and anything is possible. And we keep actually saying that Kortrijk won 2 consecutive games against Lommel last season, but that's actually factually over 90 minutes not true even as well. Of course, it did go into prolongations in that second game, so the tight margins, of course, they actually were very deserving winners of that tie in the end, but things could have gone differently nonetheless. So that's always a scenario you need to keep in mind. Despite indeed last season we also thought that it would be more of a walkover than it in the end was, despite the scoreline suggesting, if you only look at the scorelines after the game, you would think it was an easy win for Kortrijk. But yeah, even when it was very deserved, it wasn't.
And there we have it. Another week in Belgian football. Another dramatic week. Of course, Joris, thank you so much for joining me to help me, navigate our way through another week.
Always. I wish I would make a sailor comment or captain comment or something, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, we were hoping to be able to possibly bring you a special episode next week, obviously, because of the international break. As of recording, we're not sure we're going to be able to do that yet. We did have some plans which may or may not come to fruition in order to do that. So you may find a special episode dropping quite soon. You may not. If it doesn't drop, and we won't spoil what that may be, it will drop at some point for you in the not too distant future, because we are still working on that. But if it doesn't, we'll be taking a little short break next week with the international break. Hopefully the Red Devils can get the result. Whatever you're up to, look after yourselves, everybody. If you do enjoy what we're doing, please do consider leaving us a little review on your podcast platform of choice. That would be much appreciated. Equally, we also, like lots of other wonderful people in the podcasting world, have a Buy Me a Coffee account. So if you'd like to buy me and the guys a coffee, which goes a small way to covering some of the BFP's production costs, we'd be very grateful if you would do that. So as I was saying, look after yourself, everybody, and we will speak to you very, very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.